Folks, it's time we make this 2012 Ford Escape legal for the road. So what I mean when I say legal for the road is we've had to do some work on this thing because, well, it's been sitting for a long time, went for an inspection, and the thing failed, mostly because of rust. The first thing we had to do was fix the rocker panels, but today we're a little more structural, the front subframe. Let's get this thing up in the air and we'll show you what we're talking about. So previously we took the rocker panels, we cut all the bad stuff out and we welded in some new metal. There are plastic covers that go over these. We still got some paint touch-ups to do. But underneath, as you can see, it's quite scaly. And in the first video I did, I showed you exactly what we were talking about. We've since found another hole right here. You can see right in through there. Up front is where it's the worst, where there's virtually no structure here anymore. So the whole goal of this video is to get this front subframe out and get it replaced with a new one, which I've got sitting over there on the floor. So the things that we're going to have to do here is the exhaust is in the way. We've got 2 bolts here on the Y pipe and 2 bolts back here, plus this flange, which is leaking, so we're going to replace the gaskets while we're in there anyway. We've also got the cradle bolts here and here. We've got a couple of nuts sticking out of the stud there. We've got this cross member which holds the engine mount up there, which we take those 2 bolts out. This whole thing's got to come off. And then we're going to disconnect our lower ball joints and tie rods. Once all that's done, and the steering, I guess I forgot about the steering, so we'll disconnect the steering knuckle. Once that's done, this should all be able to come down and over top of the transfer case here. So yeah, the drive shaft's got to come out too. We've got all the new parts. We've got new control arms because the bushings are bad. We got new link kits, and we got a new tie rod for this side over here because the tie rod is bad. Once all of that stuff is replaced, this thing will then pass a safety inspection, which is good here in New Brunswick for 2 years. So even though the inspection is good, doesn't mean your vehicle's good for 2 years. You still got to maintain your vehicles. So we're fixing the rust. We're replacing a few mechanical components, and we'll be able to get this thing on the road this weekend. First thing I'm going to do, get our drive shaft out, disconnect our exhaust. Let's get at it. Now surely that drive shaft will just pop out of there. I mean, surely. Surely not. There we go. You mean I got to take that down too? It's not that far away from popping out of here. Thing is, if I struggle to get it out, I'm going to struggle to get it in too. She'll go. All right. Now we got to get these bolts out. Here we go. We did it, Tim.
Yep. That's all that matters.
The next thing we got to do is the steering knuckle. And there's the bolt right there. So what we're going to do is take that out. That's likely a 10 or 11 millimeter. And then we're going to put the car down and lock the steering wheel in place so it doesn't turn. That way when we slide that back on and get it back into its position, hopefully our steering wheel won't be off. I mean, we're going to send this thing for alignment afterwards anyway, but we don't want that thing twisted around, ruining our clock spring, I guess is what we're getting at. So let's see if we get that bolt out. So up in here, we've got these 2 bolts that hold the engine mount in the front, and then these 2 bolts that hold this cross member. We're going to disconnect those 2 to relieve the stress from the engine mount, and then take these 2 out because this has to come off as well. And I believe those are 13 mil. Let's see what happens here. That's not a 14, that's a 15. The 50-50-90 rule clearly states that when you think it's a 14 or a 15 and you grab the 14, it's going to be the 15. That's just the way it is. two motor mount bolts there, the two that hold the cross member onto the rad support, and then we've got one back here holding it to the subframe. Which means when we start yanking this down, that's going to be there. We can take this little cross member off. That looks like it's about a 14. We're lucky enough that none of those bolts broke. And I take this off. Now the new subframe that I bought comes with a brand new one of these, not a brand new, a new, good, used, Southern one. So we'll hang on to that little thing there, that little jewel. So exhaust, drive shaft, cross member, cross member. Now that we've got this out, we can get a really good look at just how bad that really is. It goes all the way up in there. It's crazy. All right. So at some point we're gonna have to deal with that rack and pinion. I'm gonna drop this down and get the front tires off of it because we're gonna have to access the bolts that hold the ball joints in. So let's do that. All right, so where we're at now is we've got to get these ball joints disconnected. I've already taken the bolts out. One side was 15, the other one was like 11/16. So one of those has been replaced before, I'm guessing this one, but we're gonna be replacing the whole control arm anyway. But we've got to get it separated from here. There's a little split in the metal right there. And try splitting it like so, and then give it a little bit of a pry, and then it should separate, maybe. But she's quite rusty up in there too, so it might take a little bit of heat. Will it come with a small pry bar? Oh yeah, yep. She's almost out. A little more loving. Get you guys a little bit more out of the way here. So I think those links are a 15. Yep. So if we're lucky, they'll just spin off. Wrong way. Love it when a plan comes together. And those are lifetime warranty. It looks like they've got grease fittings on them. I hope the new ones that I bought got grease fittings, because if they don't, then I might just be inclined to reuse these. So we're going to stick that back together. See, she got a grease fit in there. The bottom one does too. So let's go over and do the other side. Now, is this one going to be as cooperative? Nope. We're gonna have to get a pair of vice grips on that one. So if you're ever at this point where these won't come off and it's just spinning, in behind where these mount on, there's a little round dial. And I'll show you here in a second. You can get a pair of vice grips on there and clamp onto it so that it doesn't spin. In theory, this should spin right off. Just like so. If you can see right here and then right over here on this side, they're flat. So that allows you to get in behind there and either hold a wrench or a pair of vice grips. That link got a little bit of play in it. We're probably going to replace those anyways, but I hope the new ones that I got have grease fittings. Now, let's take apart these tie rods and we should be ready to start. Dang it, that friggin' rack and pinion. Son of a... This tie rod is bad anyway, so we are going to be replacing it. but we've got to get it off the spindle before we can do anything. Now when we come over to this side, like I said, she's got a cotter pin and a castle nut. I don't think that's factory. I think the factory ones are the nylocks. So we are going to pull this off and get that one ratcheted off there. You guys let me know down in the comments section down below. Do you think they're still using, or do you think in 2012 they were using cotter pins in tie rod ends? Or do you think this is aftermarket? Because this is old school. This is, you know, you go buy a part. This is probably the way they come now. But I'm thinking this is aftermarket. Huzzah! And then just like that, that one's loose. Outer tie rod. And here's another way to tell, maybe. It's got a zerk on it. I don't think they came with grease fittings from the factory either. Maybe this has been replaced before. That inner tie rod's got a little bit of dangle to it. You know, if they're new and they're in good shape, they should be able to hold. That one's not. This would be the time to change it, but guess what? There's no play. We're calling her quits for now. I think we're at the point in this journey where we've got to deal with that rack and pinion. So let's see what we got to do to get in there. All right, so you guys can see that nut right there. So we're going to try and get a long extension with the impact, and at the very least just see if we can, you know, just touch it. Maybe I got it sprayed down, maybe just the impact alone is enough to break it free. Come on. All right, please don't fall off, please don't fall off, please don't fall off. Imagine that. The power of the Milwaukee. So, in theory, if we're lucky enough, a pry bar should pry that off the shaft of the rack and pinion. Maybe if we give her some love taps with the BFH. Oh yeah, she's free. All right, so I think where we are now is we've got our tie rods, our ball joints, our sway bar links disconnected. The exhaust is disconnected, drive shaft, power steering or steering column is disconnected. I think now we can start working away at the big bolts. These two here in the rear, and then these two nuts up here. And I think as long as these ball joints will continue separating here, everything should start coming down. Man, look at the size of that hole. And I noticed when I was taking everything apart over here, this is really bad. We'll break it all down once we get it on the ground. I think we should be okay to start lowering this down. One thing I am going to do though, like I said before, is I am going to lower this down and wrap the steering wheel up with the seat belt so that it doesn't turn while we're moving this around. We don't want to ruin that clock spring, because if the steering wheel starts spinning and then you go to get that back on in the wrong position, that first time you make a right or a left turn, it could be already clocked and rip that little ribbon cable on the inside. So let's get that down, lock that into place, and then we can come back here with our transmission jack stand and as a third or fourth hand to help us start getting those bolts off. Now, we have loosened them, so you're not going to watch me struggle doing that. We brought them in earlier. We got a long pry bar on it. And let me show you what's happening. So, namely these back bolts, they go up through this lower control arm bushing. The control arm bushing is shot, and we are replacing the whole control arm, because you can buy these just as cheap as you can almost the bushing here. So I went to Rock Auto. I picked up a whole control arm for about 35 bucks. And what's happening is when we spin this off, we've got it broke free of the capture nut up in here, but the whole rubber part of the bushing is twisting. So we're going to have to kind of crank those down by hand as this drops down. These ones here are actually working. They're spinning out, so it shouldn't be a problem. But we're going to grab the transmission jack, which is over here behind the tires, bring it over, and give us an extra hand to help hold this in place while we start removing things. Because, well, we're working solo here. Tim has been in and out. He's gone to get me those new bolts. I don't anticipate him wanting to work any further on his day off. But he may give me that extra couple of minutes to just kind of lower this down. So let's get the transmission jack in place, and then we can start working away at cranking those rear bolts out by hand. Oh my gosh, she's gonna go. All right, so what we're trying to do now is get these bolts to turn. They don't turn very well with the impact because the rubber is cushioning all the blows. But we've got the big 3/4 ratchet with an adapter to the size that we need here, which I think is 11/16 or probably 19 millimeter. I don't know what it is in metric, but anyway, when we go and we pull this, we're starting basically like this, and I can turn that like that, and when I let go, it wants to come back at me a little bit because the rubber is spinning within the bushing. But I think when it's all said and done, we're actually spinning that bolt out of the capture nut that's trapped in there. So this is going to take a little bit of messing around. So enjoy some music and some time lapse. So we've got ourselves quite a gap up in there, which means it is unthreading. I think the problem is because the bolt is seized into the bushing, I'm binding up on trying to get it out, and it's making it harder and harder. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same process, so that in hopes that this whole thing drops down, and then we can go back and forth, working away at that as the whole thing comes out. You know, had Ford put a hole in the control arm right about here, he could have stuck an extension up in through there and actually had some work cut down. So work harder, not smarter. I was once told by somebody smarter than me. Short handle, big socket, extension. Slide that on there. Give yourself a little bit of extra leverage. Makes it a little bit easier to crank on some tight bolts. We're gonna do it. Another reason why I don't like using torches. I just had Chinese food last night. I had some leftovers for lunch today. She's gassy in here. So in case you're just tuning in, this is the hard way of taking a stuck bolt out of a piece of equipment. That seems to be seized on there pretty good with a short ratchet and very minimal room to work. So when I'm ready to yank this thing down out of here, I'll let you guys tune back in. In the meantime, I'm going to continue to fight with this thing. I'll tell you one thing, I am absolutely friggin' beat. This back bolt was being a bugger, but we've got it. It's loose. We got the transmission jack holding the subframe up. We've got our big bolts, our nuts up here and over there, kind of ready to come down. So I've just got to find my proper ratchet, which I seem to have misplaced. And we can I just tightened those finger tight back up in there, but they don't want to come off by hand. So we get that one loosened up, and that one there's by hand. These little capture, whatever you want to call them, they're like a nylock with the spacer kind of built into it. Local dealer wanted $60-something each. That's Canadian money. Even in American money, that's still about $45 for that. Why? The bolts were bad enough at 20. Anyway, we've got this thing ready to drop out. The only thing that's really kind of holding it there now is the transmission jack and the ball joints. So if the ball joints are going to be a little bit of a sweetheart, and I should just be able to tap that, and it should almost want to fall out of there, which it did. There's no pressure on that jack right now, so let's get the pry bar and start prying on here. So that's going to go over here. That's going to go. Yeah. So that jack has got a little bit of pressure on it. Let's drop her a little bit more. All right. Oh shit. You know what? We've probably got some power steering lines going into that rack somewhere. Or is it electric on these things? It'd be great if it was electric, because then it's just nothing. Where are we? Now we gotta go digging. I don't see a line. I don't see any, no. I don't see any lines going into that at all. This must be electric. The motor must be inside. All right, so we just keep prying, I guess. Keep prying until something falls. Hopefully it doesn't fall on me. Oh, you know what I did forget? Huzzah! Dag nabbit. Let me show you. You see that right there? Right, let's focus. No, not the hose. So you see that right there? Yep. That's an engine mount. There's a bolt coming from the other side. We got to get that bolt out. Son of a biscuit. All right, so we got that mount out, and now we are just wiggling and jiggling, trying to get this thing detached. That's what I'm trying to say, from the ball joints, and it's being a little bit of a cranky pants. There's one. Come on, Jason, hit it. Throw your purse at it. Oh, that engine mount has kind of got it held up in there too. So let's drop that down. Give her a little bit of a pry this way. Back over here. And do the same thing. I think what's happening is the bolts that are stuck in the back, because they're seized into the bushings, are not letting us come down far enough. Okay, it's let go of that. So I think what we got to do is lift it up and over the transfer case where it connects to the drive shaft. I think is really all that's holding us up. I think. So if that's the case, then I should be able to just gonna go like that. Like this thing literally is ready to fall out of there. Let me get you in here so you can see so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we're clearly disconnected here. We are disconnected where that nut went on to that stud. This bolt is disconnected, but it keeps wanting to stick itself back up in the hole. I can't draw it down because it's seized in the hole there. Over here on the passenger side, the bolt is out of the hole, but again, it's seized in the bushing, so I can't push it down. Here is the transmission or the transfer case. This whole unit has to kind of come back and over that to get it out. So it's going to take a two-person, it's going to take two people. One on this side, manhandling it, trying to get it out of there. And I'm not sure if you can see it. So there is our transmission mount right in the center of your screen. And there's the hole that it goes in. So that is free. That's freed itself up. And there is your steering shaft. That's let go. So where we're at now is, so we're just at the point where I need a second set of hands to try and literally manhandle this thing out of here. Then we can start switching things over to the new one, like new control arms, sway bar links, and bushings. But looks like I'm gonna have to go find some help, so maybe I can find Junior. In the meantime, it's about supper time. I could just hear my wife pulled in, so she's done work for the day. Maybe I can convince her to come out and give me a hand, get her hands greasy. Not likely. Anyways, we'll be back in a few minutes. Well, it is the next day, and a little bit of a late start this morning. It's about 20 after 10. We were up late last night watching the Tyson-Paul boxing match on our Nintendo NES. At least the reason why we used our NES is because the picture quality was much better than it was on Netflix. Quick little breakdown. The first bout was horrible. Showboating YouTube stars just trying to make a name for themselves, and very little happened. Second match was great. Probably one of the best all night, followed by the best one all night, the ladies. I don't know. One of them got their ass kicked. And then to the main event, I thought Tyson was going to pull it off there in the first couple of rounds, but by the third and fourth round, he was tired, and it showed. And I think, you know, the real losers in this whole boxing match thingy was us. We stayed up all night. They packed the AT&T Stadium down there in Arlington, Texas. Everybody paid big prices for tickets. Netflix, although the video quality sucked, probably sucked in tens of millions of people. We're the big losers here because the fighting wasn't that great, at least in the main event. And the picture quality was real shitty. So Netflix, do better. And Jake Paul, stop picking on the old guys. I expected more out of Mike Tyson, but after all, he's almost 60 years old. What did you expect? Anyways, we got to get back to this Ford Escape, getting this subframe taken down. So let's get at it. So you guys see this piece right here. This is part of the subframe that bolts up here. There's a stud right here. Look, I can take my hand and almost break that apart because it's so rusty at the bottom. That is crazy. And I drove this thing on the highway. Shame on me. All right, so now that we've scared the shit out of ourselves by knowing what we know now, so close. And guys, if you're a DIYer and you don't have one of these exhaust insulator removal tools, you gotta have one. It's pretty simple. If you got your insulator there, it just hooks on and pushes on that, and pops those insulators off. No struggling. It helps if you lube them up a little bit too. We're gonna leave that one on there because, well, we're gonna need it. Anyways, we got the exhaust out of the way. So we've got the exhaust out of the way, and that should give us better access to sliding this thing off. So let's get this done. So close. I do. Oh, I can't catch it. That's what I'm afraid of. Oh, geez, over here. Just like that. Now, we get it moved out of the way so we can start swapping over parts like our sway bar and our rack and pinion. All of this will come with it. We're going to put new bushings in there whether we think it needs it or not, because it's going to be a pain in the ass to ever do that down the road. And we do have one bad tie rod on this side. So let's get this out underneath the car. We'll get over to the other side there and we'll start swapping things over. So one thing I've never really understood why, I mean, I kind of do engineering and all that stuff, but we know how we feel about engineers, is why we need so many different size bolts. You know, we got 14s here, we've got 13 16ths or whatever the metric equivalent is here. We got 15s, we've got 17s on the other side. Like, can one bolt not just do for everything? And if it's a big bolt, okay, maybe it's overkill. And we are missing one over here, so we'll have to rob one out of the other one. So one thing that we are not going to swap is this motor mount. This actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. It is missing a bolt here, so we'll just steal the one out of the other one. So this is empty. Your rack bolts in up here. Sway bars, sway bar bushing, or your sway bar mounts here. So hopefully we'll be able to just swap everything over all at once and get these out, and hopefully none of the bolts break off or won't come out of the old one. Let's get over there. Now that we got everything apart, let's just take a really good look at the severity of rust. So you know that these are the two rear mounts here, the two front ones are here. This is virtually all that holds this onto the vehicle. Everything else ties together, like your rack and pinion, your mount, your ball joints. But take a look at this perch over here. Not only is it rusted away at the base here, it's cracked right here. This is generally what's prone to be your problem. We get inside here and you can see my hands through the other side. You're not supposed to be able to see that. That's supposed to be boxed in. And then when we flip this over, again, this is supposed to be boxed in here. There's your seam coming right down like so, and it's all hollowed out there. And this perch or this mount is just flexing. Once this breaks, you lose the structural integrity of your forward lower control arm. Back one's doing all the work. This comes out, tire spins off to the right, you're into the ditch. Heaven forbid, that's the least of your problems. If it's the driver's side, this one actually is pretty good shape, then you're going into traffic and you're hurting somebody else. All right, so we are ready to start swapping parts. And some of these parts we're gonna swap right here. Some we're gonna wait for. To save weight, but those control arms use the same bolt to hold in place back here as holding the subframe to the car. So we kind of got to wait for that. But we are going to be installing these sway bar bushings. These ones actually look fairly good, but if I ever have to change them, it's quite a job to do so after the fact. So these are a Mevotech MK201311, and I will leave a link in the description box down below for all the parts that I'm using here, as well as any specified tools that we used. So let's get this swapped out, and then we can put the rack and pinion in. All right, so we've got our rack and pinion installed. We've got our sway bar and new bushings. These links are actually in really good shape. They do have grease fittings. The ones that I picked up do not. So we're going to use these because they're still quite stiff. I think they're going to be all right. This one over here, same thing. It's still quite stiff. This one has got a little bit of, well, I mean, it's not loose, but it's got a little bit of play. So, but we'll pay attention to it. We got a couple over there if we need them. and they're very simple to change out at any given time. I did find an extra bolt for the control arm, the forward control arm bushing. So what we got to do now is get this loaded up on the transmission jack and see if we can't wrestle this thing into place. Hopefully we don't have as much issue with it as we did, well, you know, getting this one out. While we're in here, let's take a look and see if we're up against anything surprising. So while we're in here, let's take a look and see if we're up against anything surprising. Now we do have a couple of nuts on those brake lines that are swollen quite bad, but where the actual engine cradle sits in the front is still good. There's still paint on it. We're going to spray that down a little bit. Same thing up here. Got some scale in the paint, but still fairly solid. Come over this side, same thing. A little bit of scale, but the metal's still thick, and I tapped on it quite a bit. And there's lots of strength there. So we're going to spray some undercoating just in this area right here for now, so that when we put the new so when we put the new cradle up in there, it'll be sealed and have a little bit of help for a few more years anyway. No other things that surprised me up here. We do have a little bit of an oil leak. It looks like it's coming possibly from the timing cover, maybe. I'm not worried too much about it. And up here we got a little bit of seepage around that transmission pan. And again, maybe around the oil pan. We're going to snug those 10 millimeters, maybe they're 11s. We're going to snug those up anyway and try and mitigate a little bit of oil leakage. Other than that, we've got our tie rod. We will replace that once it's on the vehicle because we'll have better leverage. And this thing's going to weigh a little bit less because we don't have the control arms in it. So let's get this thing wrestled up in there. Hopefully we can get that done before lunchtime. Well, too late. It's 5 minutes after. So let's wrestle with this thing a little bit. If it goes smoothly getting it up in there, which I hope it should, then we'll just let it sit there until after lunch and we'll come back and hopefully get this thing put back together today. Yeah, well, I think this is a good place to stop for lunch. Definitely going to need a second person. I said that about getting it down. I probably could weasel it up there. The problem is it's so damn heavy and awkward that it would just be so much handier to have one guy over here on this side holding it and twisting it with me while I'm over here, because it's almost got to go up like this and then level out. Got to get that mount. It's not so much the mount, it's getting the rack and pinion up over top of this transfer case. And just simply the fact that, you know, I'm a weakling and this is heavy. So, good place to break for lunch, and when we come back, hopefully I'll track down somebody who can give me a hand with this thing. It's a good time to start talking about today's sponsor, Zuwheel. They've reached out to me in the past to do a sponsorship for them. They sent me this little 4-in-1 socket that is great around the shop. We've been using it for quite a while now. So let's take a look at it and see exactly how you're getting 4 sizes out of one socket. So if you take a look at the front of it, the top piece here does 21 and 17 millimeter. And when you flip it over, it does 22 and 19. So 19 and 21 being your most common sizes. And the way it works is that it's got one size on the inside of that chrome ring. But if you're going to be using it for something bigger, that chrome ring will actually slide down out of the way and bite onto your bigger size. And in this case, your bigger size would be the 22. When you flip it over, it does the same thing. It's got 17 millimeter on the inside, and then if you push that down, and again, it just slides right over the socket, those teeth will bite onto your 21 millimeter. And when you go to use this thing, it does come with this small little 3-inch extension. So depending on which size you're using, it goes in, locks into place, and then that way you can go and use that on your big socket. And if it's using it for the smaller one or the 19 millimeter, you just flip it over, stick the socket down in there, and away you go. We've got my wife's 07 Crown Vic. We're getting ready to take the summer tires off and make room for the winter tires. So let's test this out and show you how it works. So these are a 21 millimeter socket. That's why we've got the 21 on the end. So when I go to fit this on here, it just kind of seats into place. able to take that right off there. And when you're done working on aluminum wheels, folks, don't forget to re-torque after about 100 kilometers or 60 miles. You don't want those wheels coming loose. Thanks to Zwiel for sending me this multi-tool. For taking lug nuts off, like I said, we use it in our shop. We use it every day. It's very, very handy, and it will withstand the abuse of an impact gun. So make sure you check out Zwiel. Link down in the description box down below and support them like they've supported me. Now, we got to get this job done. All right, so I had a friend of mine pop over, and everything happened so quickly I didn't even have a chance to turn the camera on. But we got the subframe in place, and in order to get that up there without friggin' weaseling around, I took this little yoke off the transfer case. That gave us a good 4 inches, maybe 3.5, 4 inches there to get that in. So we've got our nuts here on both sides. We've got these in temporarily because we're going to have to remove those to take out, or to put in the control arm. And we've actually managed to get the steering knuckle hole lined up, but I dropped the bolt and I can't find it. So I'm just in the process of trying to find that. Once I get that done, then we can start getting everything else put back together in the order that we took it off. That rear engine mount is in. I did manage to get that in place. We're about ready to put that cross member across the bottom and get that front engine mount loaded up in there. But I can't really do a whole lot until I get that steering shaft bolt in place. I got to find it to do that. So once I get that done, we'll be back putting the tie rods together, getting ready to put the control arms back in once the other engine mounts are done. And then we can go on to the small stuff like the exhaust and drive shaft. Should be able to button this thing up here in the next hour or so. But in the meantime, gotta go find my bolt. All right, so we struggled a little bit with this cross member in the front because, well, it's different than the one that came with the new case. So this might be for a front wheel drive versus all wheel drive, not sure. V6 versus 4-cylinder. Anyways, we got that in there and we got this lined up. So we're getting ready to put the drive shaft back in. Now remember, we had taken this yoke off and I can't find any torque specs anywhere for this, if there is any, for that big nut that goes in there. I got it back into roughly where I think it was to begin with, and I guess we're just going to go with a couple ugga-duggas and hope that that does a trick. It's not moving, there's no play there, so I guess we're going to call that good. So we can get this back into place, and then we'll put this cross member across here. Now, as I recall, this came out quite firmly, but I think it's going to, well, I think it'll go back in there as long as we can. Maybe not. Whew. I'm thinking I'm going to have to take the center support bearing off just enough to get some more flexibility. So let's do that first. Are they this big? Ish. Incoming. Dirt in the face. I suppose now would have been a good time to change that support bearing, wouldn't it? I wonder if just having that off there is enough. Yeah, right. Yeah, right, Jason. That hang from there. That hang from there. Why I didn't do that in the first place is beyond me. Probably should have checked that U-joint while I was there. It's fine. All of these bolts here, hopefully everything lines up. So now I think is the time that we put that front Y pipe on, because I don't want to be fishing it up underneath this cross member. So we've got a few new gaskets to put up in there. This one's just a kind of a ball and socket type deal. And then everything will also bolt onto it from behind. So I think we can call this part ready for exhaust. Uh-oh. Broke it. This damn gun is too friggin' powerful sometimes. Shit. Okay, so we're ready to put these lower control arms in. The reason why I went this route, like I said before, the bushings were bad on the old one. So we're getting new bushings on both ends and the new ball joint. So we're kind of doing everything all at once. These were only like $36 or something like that on Rock Auto. So left and right, there's the part numbers right there. So let's get set up and get this one put in. So I don't know how you guys do it, but I usually start back here at the rear control arm. And we'll get our bolt started here. And then we can just kind of pry it up and into our slot. There. So that just slid in there once. It should slide in again, I think. All right. There you go. There you go. And we get our new lock bolt, cinch pin, whatever you want to call it. All right, lock that in place. Take this. And we get you locked back into place. Just like that. And put you in there. And we'll go down, do the other side, get all this stuff tightened up. And then we can finish up with our exhaust and call this done. Okay, so everything is tight. We got our big bolts up here in the subframe. We got our small bolt in the front control arm bushing. Tie rods are tight. Oh, this one's not tight. Gotta go back and do this one. Sway bar links are tight, and the pinch bolt down here on the ball joint is tight on this side. So we got this side, except for the tie rod, looked after. Over here we got a new tie rod. It's tight, link is tight, pinch bolt is tight. Both control arm bushings and the frame bolts are tight. And I think we're good. So let me get that one tie rod bolt done, and we should be good. Get the wheels back on it, get her up in the air, finish off with that exhaust. I might put that off till tomorrow. It's getting a little bit later in the day. It's 4:17 and I am beat. So I think that exhaust might be tomorrow's project. So when we come back, we'll have working exhaust, wheels will be on it, and we should be able to inspect this thing. Anyways, let me get that tie rod bolt done. Call her a day. Okay, again, it's the next day, and all we got left to do to this thing is to get the exhaust patched up. There's two things we got to fix. One, I'm not going to replace this whole muffler. We're going to put a couple of pieces of tin over these holes and hopefully get that quieted down. And two, we got to fix that stud because we broke that off, tightening it up. And then we can start putting the exhaust back together and reconnect it to the rear resonator. Now that's got some sort of a gasket on there. She's baked on pretty good. We'll get that off because I do have another one to replace it with. And then once the exhaust is fixed and I get these rocker panel covers back on, the only thing left is that small little hole right there. We are going to fix that. And then mechanically she's ready for a inspection, and we'll go through that as well. We do have some wheels and tires to potentially put on this thing as well. Junior had a set that he was going to use if he lifted a Crown Vic. So they're 16-inch tires. They're black, but they got their winter tires as well. These are just all season. And I think they're the same size, if not close, that it should kind of set this thing off a little bit. As far as fixing the rust on this thing, on the outside, we are going to touch up around the fenders as well as the door handles and all the spot that the paint is flaking off this thing. But then I think we might do some sort of a Raptor liner or something along those lines. So I'm going to see what's out there and see if we can't pick something up that's white. That way we don't have to worry so much about masking off the door jambs and all that BS. We're just going to roll it on or spray it on or however it's supposed to go on. But again, before we can do all that, let's get this muffler patched up. Well, that one's tacked into place. So now we'll cut this one and grind it down, and we can go over the whole thing. Well, you can see where I started. It is all blotchy and this and that. But when I came over here, I started doing some spot welding, and it seemed to hold really good. And over here, like, I'm really impressed with that. That came out good. And then that final patch that we put in, I spotted it the whole way around. I mean, it's just a muffler, and I'm just a beginner. And yes, there's a lot of bubble gum in there. However, it seals it up. Let's hope it's quiet. Okay, so we've got our exhaust all up into place. Everything's tight. And we're getting ready to start this thing for the first time with the exhaust fixed. Hopefully, it's a lot quieter. So up front here is just like a ball and socket. So that just kind of pulled together, no gasket necessary. Back here, we had to put a new gasket in on this flange because I broke the stud. You can see where I've got a nut and bolt on that there. Had to put a donut gasket in here on this muffler piece. And then, of course, we got that patched up, and we had to put another donut gasket back here. Hopefully, this thing sounds good. Let's go start it up and make sure that we did everything the way we were supposed to. All right, let's see how much quieter she is. Normal enough for me, I guess. So there we have it. It took me basically all weekend. You know, a couple hours Friday afternoon, 6 hours yesterday, and a couple hours, well, about an hour and a half this morning just messing around with that exhaust. But I think if a fellow was to do this whole job on his own without having to record, you know, you could probably book yourself off a couple, 3 hours and have it all done, even if you're fighting with a few bolts and this and that. Hoist is definitely not necessary, but a big advantage if you have one. All the parts that we use, like I said before, are going to be down in the description box down below. So that if you guys need any of this stuff, you know, when you're doing this job, there'll be a list down there for you. Also, don't forget Olde Carr Guy merch. There's the first link in the description box down below is a link to my store. And if you guys are interested in getting yourself some Olde Carr Guy merchandise, t-shirts, hats, hoodies, stickers, and even some beer koozies, they're there. And if you use promo code OCG15, you'll get 15% off your order, no matter how much you're ordering. So I encourage you to go help support the channel in more ways than just watching these videos, which I really do appreciate. And we just hit 35,000 subscribers. Thanks to you guys. I appreciate all of that. Guys, stay focused on the windshield, not the rear view mirror. I love you, God bless. Let's do it again in the next video, where hopefully we'll be doing some paint repair and some new wheels and tires on this thing.